You've stood at the edge of the ocean and looked out, past the point where you could see anything but water. Salt in the air, wind pulling at your hair, maybe on vacation, maybe just a walk at sunset. Your eyes reaching for a shore that isn't there. Now walk in anyway. Sometime around 65,000 years ago, a group of people did that. Not drifting, not swept out by accident, choosing open water with nothing ahead but more water for over 90 kilometers. On that beach, likely, a small fleet pushed off together. Rafts lashed from timber and rope, families crammed in tight, dried food and water gourds stacked between them. This is a plausible reconstruction, not a confirmed scene, but the physics of the crossing demand something close to it. Archaeologist Chris Clarkson, digging at a rock shelter called Madjedbebe in Australia's Northern Territory, uncovered stone tools and ground pigment dating to that same window. Proof people were living on the far side of that crossing far earlier than anyone had proposed. For decades, the assumption was simple. Early humans hugged coastlines, hopping between islands they could see. Short trips, low risk. The geography argues otherwise. Even at the lowest sea levels of the last ice age, the water between those islands and the landmass we now call Sahul, Australia and New Guinea joined together back then, stretched wider than eyesight allows in every direction. Which leaves one hard possibility. Somebody built vessels that could survive open ocean, stocked them for a journey with no visible endpoint, and launched. Tens of thousands of years before we thought boats like that existed anywhere on Earth. So here's the question worth carrying into the next part. What does it take to step into a boat aimed at nothing you can see? That question isn't only about ancient people. It's about a bet your own brain makes, constantly, without asking permission. Trusting a job offer, a flight, a relationship that hasn't proven itself yet. Neuroscientists trace that ability to the prefrontal cortex, the part of you holding a future that doesn't exist and moving toward it anyway. That circuitry was already fully online 65,000 years ago on a beach, staring at water with no far shore in sight. Consider what failure meant out there. No Coast Guard, no radio. If the food ran out 3 days in, there was no rescue boat in this story. A mother kept her children calm while the shoreline disappeared behind her, with no way of knowing for the entire journey whether she'd made the right call. Waves slapped the hull through the night. A fire, shielded from the wind in a clay pot, was the only warm thing for miles. That's the stake underneath it all. Hunger, family, any chance of going home, riding on a decision nobody could take back. But holding that nerve for one trip is one thing. Doing it as a group, with enough people to actually start a new population on the other side, that's a different kind of math, and it's far less forgiving than you'd guess. For years, the easy explanation was accident. A storm, a few unlucky fishermen, driftwood, and evolution does the rest. No boat builders required, no plan. Biology makes that hard to believe. Founder population models suggest a lasting human population needs several dozen people at minimum, not 2 or 3 castaways clinging to wreckage or inbreeding depression sets in within a few generations. Consider what that means. Not one canoe, but a fleet moving together in the dark so no single wave could end the whole attempt. Humans also carry a built-in advantage most mammals don't. We sweat with unusual efficiency, a trait that evolved for chasing prey across open land, and happened to double as an asset at sea, letting the body push through hours of thirst and sun without shutting down. Knowledge did the rest. Wave patterns, star positions, birds that only fly so far from land before turning back, then vanishing from view as the boats moved further out, taking any sense of nearby shore with them. Pacific navigators, the Marshall Islands stick chart tradition especially, still encode wave knowledge like this today, passed down orally. Something similar plausibly existed for this crossing too. Here's a fact that tends to surprise people. In 2019, researchers built dugout canoes using only Stone Age tools and successfully crossed the Kuroshio, one of Earth's strongest ocean currents off Japan. So the boats worked, the bodies could take it, the knowledge existed. The hardest part wasn't building the raft, it was convincing dozens of people to get on it. The evidence surfaced slowly, one dig at a time, each find pushing the timeline back further than expected. Start with the tools. At Madjedbebe, Clarkson's team found ground-edged stone axes dating to roughly 65,000 years ago, among the oldest known anywhere on the planet, predating similar technology in Europe by tens of thousands of years. Whoever landed there wasn't just surviving, they were inventing almost immediately. Out there, on the land they walked into, giant wombat-like diprotodon, flightless birds twice human height, monitor lizards the size of small crocodiles. None of them wired to fear a human silhouette, because none had ever seen one. Most of Sahul's giant animals vanished within a few thousand years of that first human presence. Whether hunting, climate shift, or both drove that, researchers are still debating it. The genetics tell a quieter story. Modern Aboriginal Australian and Papua New Guinean populations carry DNA lineages that split from other non-African populations in a window matching this crossing, roughly 50 to 70,000 years ago. That's not distant history, that's ancestry, running from that beach to people breathing right now. And this wasn't the only time it happened. The Bismarck Archipelago migrations near New Guinea around the same era, the settling of Cyprus, where cut-marked hippo and elephant bones roughly 12,000 years old point to hunters arriving by boat. Centuries later, Rapa Nui, reached by double-hulled canoes and navigation passed down by memory alone. 4 populations, thousands of kilometers and years apart, each one solving the same impossible problem with no idea anyone else already had. That stops looking like coincidence. It starts looking like something built into the species. What comes next stops being a story about them. Here's the part that lands differently once it sinks in. Sahul likely wasn't a one-time miracle. Current evidence points to a pattern, repeated, deliberate open-water voyages, closer to a standard human skill than a single lucky exception. Skeletal remains from Sahul's earliest populations show bone density and robustness consistent with lives of sustained, punishing exertion, generation after generation, not soft landings, bodies shaped by demand. And here's the realization worth sitting with before we close this out. You didn't need to descend from Sahul specifically for this to be true of you. Population geneticists trace nearly all non-African humans alive today back to a narrow set of migration events out of Africa, compressed into a tight window of time. One interpretation, somewhere in your own line, someone got into a boat, or crossed a strait, or walked into land no one in their family had seen, and it worked. That's not a metaphor about the human spirit. That's a fact sitting in your own cells right now, whether you've ever thought about it or not. Somewhere on a beach long since drowned by rising seas, a small group of people looked at open water and decided whatever was on the other side was worth never being seen again. You're only here to hear this story because for them, it wasn't. Ancient rafts crossing blind ocean, and a modern flight app pinging you an hour before boarding, strip away the technology, and the choice underneath is the same one. Step forward without seeing the end, and trust it anyway. The difference is comfort, not courage. Those first voyagers had no forecast, no rescue signal, no way to call it off once the shore behind them vanished. You board a plane backed by radar, air traffic control, and a pilot trained on thousands of prior flights. Underneath both, though, sits the same instinct, the one that once stood at the edge of the water, now checking a gate number on a screen. We didn't outgrow it. We just got better at making the unknown a little more predictable. So go back to the beginning, the edge of the water, the horizon with nothing on it. Someone stood there 65,000 years ago, afraid, and walked forward anyway. Because somewhere in a brain built exactly like yours, the unknown stopped feeling like a wall. It started feeling like a plan. Every ocean on Earth has a shoreline where someone once had to decide that.